Picture a specific moment. It's a Tuesday evening. You're sitting at your kitchen table with your laptop open and a slightly cold cup of coffee next to you. And you're doing something you've been avoiding for months. You're adding up everything you spent that month. Not because you wanted to, because you had to. Your checking account hit a number that made your stomach drop, and you still have 10 days left until payday. You weren't being reckless. You weren't going out every weekend. You weren't buying designer things. You were just living. Groceries, rent, the occasional takeout when you were too tired to cook, the streaming subscriptions you kept telling yourself you'd cancel. And somehow, despite working a real job, making what felt like decent money, you had almost nothing left to show for it. And the worst part? You couldn't figure out where it went. If that feeling is familiar, stay with me. Because 18 months after that Tuesday evening, you could have $30,000 sitting in a savings account, on a salary of $55,000 a year. No side hustle windfall, no inheritance, no lucky break. Just a shift in how you understand money, and a system that actually fits your real life. This is that story. Here's what most people get wrong when they hear a number like $30,000 saved in 18 months. They assume it required some kind of extreme sacrifice. They picture someone eating plain rice for dinner every night, never going out, never enjoying anything, basically becoming a monk with a brokerage account. And that framing is actually dangerous, because it makes saving feel like punishment. And if saving feels like punishment, your brain will find every possible reason to avoid it. The other thing people assume is that this is only possible if you're already doing well financially. Like, $55,000 sounds fine on paper, but after taxes, after rent, after all the basic costs of adult life in most cities, you're not exactly swimming in surplus. Depending on where you live, $55,000 can feel tight. It can feel like you're doing everything right and still barely keeping your head above water. So the real problem isn't that people don't want to save. Almost everyone wants to save. The problem is that most of the advice out there is built for a different person, someone with more margin, more time, more emotional energy. The classic, just cut your coffee habit and invest the difference advice doesn't account for the fact that sometimes that coffee is the one thing keeping you sane before a 9-hour workday. What this video offers you isn't a budget spreadsheet. It's not a list of sacrifices. It's more like a way of seeing your financial life differently. Because once you see it differently, the decisions start making more sense. They stop feeling like deprivation and start feeling like choices you're actually making for yourself. And that distinction between choosing and depriving is everything. So let's walk through what actually happens, step by step, in the sequence it happens, because the order matters more than people realize. The first thing you do is figure out what you're actually working with. That sounds obvious. But there's a difference between knowing your salary and understanding your real take-home after taxes, health insurance premiums, retirement contributions, and everything else that gets pulled out before you ever see the money. On a $55,000 salary, your actual take-home lands closer to $3,400 to $3,500 a month, depending on the month. That's it. That's what you have to work with. Most financial advice starts with your gross income. And that's a fantasy number. You need to start with the number that hits your bank account, because that's the only number that's real. Once you know that number, $3,400 per month, you write down every fixed expense. These are the things that don't change month to month: rent, car insurance, phone bill, internet, any subscriptions with fixed costs. In this scenario, that comes to roughly $1,900. Rent is the biggest piece. $1,350 for a one-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city. Not cheap, but not New York City either. So after fixed expenses, you're left with about $1,500. That's the number you actually have to manage. $1,500 for food, transportation, personal care, clothing, entertainment, anything unexpected. And out of that $1,500, the goal is to save $1,600 per month. Now, you probably just did the math. $1,500 leftover, $1,600 savings goal. That doesn't add up. And you're right. It doesn't work that way from the start. That $1,600 monthly figure is what you average over the 18 months. Some months you save more, some months less. What really drives the accumulation is a combination of three things working together: intentional income, expense restructuring, and what we'll call psychological containment. Let's break each of those down. On a $55,000 salary, there isn't a lot of room to dramatically increase your income without adding a second job. And going that route long-term risks burning you out, and burnout is expensive in ways that don't show up on a spreadsheet. But there are a few quieter moves that actually work. The first is reviewing your tax withholding. You might be getting a large refund every year. Over $2,000 is common, which sounds like a win until you realize that's just money you loan to the government interest-free all year. Adjusting your withholding so that money comes back to you in your paychecks instead adds roughly $170 a month to your take-home. Not dramatic, but real. The second move is a quiet audit of your benefits. A lot of employers offer things that employees never fully use: health savings accounts, commuter benefits, dependent care accounts. Contributing to an HSA, for example, reduces your taxable income, meaning your financial position improves even if your net take-home doesn't shift much. Those dollars work more efficiently. And third, probably the most meaningful shift on the income side: you stop treating every irregular income as extra money to spend. Tax refunds, annual bonuses, birthday money from family, all of it used to feel like permission to splurge. The new rule: anything outside your regular monthly budget goes directly to savings before you have a chance to mentally spend it. That one behavioral shift alone can add several $1,000s over 18 months without changing your lifestyle at all. This is where people expect the part where you cut everything. That's not what happens. What happens instead is that you get honest about what's actually making your life better versus what you're just paying for out of habit or quiet anxiety. The clearest example: for streaming subscriptions. You're actively using one. The other three are on auto-renewal, and you haven't thought about them in months. That's $35 a month leaving your account for services you're not using. You cancel 3, keep 1. You look at your grocery spending, not to slash it, but to understand it. You're spending about $400 a month on groceries, and a fair amount of it is going to waste. Food that goes bad before you cook it, fancy ingredients you bought for one recipe and never touched again. You don't go on some extreme meal prep protocol. You just start shopping with a basic weekly plan instead of browsing the store when you're hungry. That brings grocery spending down to around $280 without eating worse. Actually, you eat better because you're cooking the things you actually bought. Transportation is another area. You have a car. The car costs money in insurance, gas, and occasional maintenance. There are weeks where you could easily use public transit instead. You just haven't bothered because driving feels faster and easier. You start being more intentional about it. You don't sell the car. You just use it less. That shaves maybe $60 to $80 a month off transportation costs without any real sacrifice. The one area you deliberately protect is social spending. Going out for dinner occasionally, catching a movie, grabbing coffee with a friend. You keep that. You set a soft budget, around $150 a month, for anything social or purely enjoyable. And you treat that budget as non-negotiable in the other direction. You won't guilt yourself for spending it. Because one of the fastest ways to fail at saving is to turn your entire social life into a source of sham. Here's something nobody talks about enough. The math of saving is not actually the hard part. The hard part is managing the psychological pressure that builds up when you're trying to hold money back month after month. There's a concept in behavioral economics called decision fatigue, the idea that the more choices you have to make, the worse you get at making them. If every financial decision requires a conscious judgment call, should I spend this or save it? You will eventually get tired and choose the path of least resistance, which is almost always spending. So you automate as much as possible. The day your paycheck hits, money moves. A fixed amount goes to savings automatically, before you can see it sitting in your checking account looking available. You set up a separate savings account, not at the same bank as your checking, specifically to add a small psychological barrier. Out of sight actually does help. You also stop checking your savings balance obsessively. Early on, it's tempting to check it constantly, and when it's growing slowly, it creates this anxious feeling like it isn't working. Switching to a monthly review, once a month, like a check-in, makes the whole process feel less like monitoring a patient and more like managing a long-term project. And you give yourself permission to have one completely unbudgeted month every 6 months. Not to blow everything, but if a good opportunity comes up, a trip with friends, something meaningful, you don't want to feel like you're living in a financial prison. 1 month per half year with breathing room makes the discipline in the other 5 months feel sustainable rather than suffocating. Months 1 through 3, you're figuring out the system. Savings land around $800 to $1,000 per month. Progress, but slower than you wanted. Months 4 through 9, the system is in place, automation is working, habits have settled. You're consistently hitting $1,600 to $1,800 per month in savings. This is when the balance starts to look real. It crosses $10,000 somewhere around month 7, and the feeling that arrives with that milestone is hard to describe. Something has actually changed. Months 10 through 12. A few months go lighter. A car repair in month 11 costs about $900, but there's a small emergency buffer separate from the savings goal, about $2,000, built before anything else. It does exactly what it was supposed to do. You don't drain the main account. Months 13 through 18, the system is optimized. You know your habits, you know your weak spots. Savings run between $1,800 and $2,200 in the stronger months, which makes up for the slower ones. By month 18, the total sits at just over $30,000. The account also earned interest, not a dramatic amount, but a high-yield account paying between 4.5% and 5% annually through most of this period adds a few $100s without any additional effort. There's a moment about 8 months in where something shifts psychologically, and it's worth describing because it's the part most financial content leaves out. You're looking at your account, around $12,000 at this point, and you realize you feel different than you did before. Not richer, exactly. Not like you've cracked some code, but calmer. There's a low-level financial anxiety you've been carrying for years that has just quieted down a little. What you hadn't realized before was how much that background noise was costing you. Not in dollars, but in energy. The mental load of financial uncertainty is real. When you don't have a cushion, everything feels a little more fragile. A medical bill, a car problem, an unexpected job change. Any of those things becomes a crisis instead of a setback. And managing constant low-grade financial anxiety takes up cognitive and emotional space that could be going toward literally anything else in your life. The realization is this: saving money isn't really about the money, or not just about the money. It's about converting financial uncertainty into a kind of quiet confidence. The $30,000 in that account isn't just dollars. It's time. It's options. It's the ability to say no to something that isn't right for you without a panic attack about how you'll cover next month's rent. And that realization changes everything about how you think about the whole project. It isn't austerity. It isn't deprivation. It's buying your own peace of mind, incrementally, 1 month at a time. There's also something powerful that happens once savings reach a critical mass. Money in a high-yield savings account starts working for you, not dramatically, but noticeably. When you have $30,000 earning 4.5% annually, that's $1,350 in interest per year. Passive. No extra work. That's a month of groceries and utilities arriving in your account just because the money is sitting there. That's the beginning of what people call the momentum shift, where the math starts to feel like it's on your side instead of against you. So here's how to actually apply this if you're starting from scratch. The first thing, non-negotiable, is to know your real monthly take-home. Not your salary, not your gross. The actual number that hits your account after everything. If you don't know that number off the top of your head right now, that's your first move. Log into your bank. Look at the last 3 deposits. Take an average. That's your real income. Everything starts there. From there, write down only the things you absolutely have to pay every month. The things that would cause an immediate crisis if you didn't. rent or mortgage, insurance, utilities, any debt minimum payments. Everything else is variable, meaning it can be shaped. Before you set a savings goal, build a small buffer first. $1,000 or $2,000 sitting in a separate account specifically for unexpected things. Not a dream fund, not a vacation fund, just a life is unpredictable and I need to not destroy my savings every time something breaks fund. This is the thing that keeps emergencies from becoming setbacks and setbacks from becoming crises. Then, and only then, set a savings number. And here's the honest truth about that number. Start smaller than you think you should. Not because you're not capable of more, but because sustainability beats intensity every single time. Hitting a savings target for 12 months in a row is worth more than an ambitious target you burn out on after 3. Automate the transfer. The day your paycheck lands, the money moves. You don't decide each month whether you feel like saving. It just happens. This is the single most powerful structural change you can make, and it costs nothing to set up. Make your savings account slightly inconvenient to access. Different bank. No debit card attached. A name that reminds you what it's for. These small friction points are not silly. They work. Your brain is wired to take the path of least resistance. And you can use that tendency to your advantage by making spending your savings just a little bit harder than spending from your checking account. Review your variable spending once a month, not every day. A monthly check-in is enough to catch drift before it becomes a problem. If you went over in one category, note it and move on. You're not building a perfect system. You're building a consistent one. And protect one category of spending that genuinely makes your life better. Whatever that is for you. Connection with friends, a physical hobby, travel, good food. Give it a realistic budget and then let yourself spend it without guilt. Because a savings plan that costs you your entire quality of life will collapse, and you'll feel worse than when you started. One more thing on the investment side, because it would be a real omission to leave it out. If your employer offers a retirement match and you're not contributing at least enough to capture the full match, that's where money should go first, before anything else. A 50% or 100% match on your contributions is a guaranteed return no savings account can touch. And that money comes out before you ever see it, which means it doesn't compete with your monthly budget at all. The $30,000 in this scenario lives in a high-yield savings account, and that's the right home for that money because it's accessible and low risk. It's money you might actually need. But money you won't touch for 20 or 30 years belongs somewhere different, growing differently. Don't confuse the two pools. Know what each one is for and why. There's something that gets lost in most money conversations online, especially when everything is framed in extremes. Either you're barely surviving or you've made it. The middle ground, where most of us actually live, rarely gets talked about clearly. Saving $30,000 in 18 months on a $55,000 salary isn't some extraordinary feat reserved for people with unusual discipline or unusual luck. It's a pretty ordinary person making pretty consistent decisions over a reasonable stretch of time. That's it. That's the whole thing. No secret system. No wealthy family backstop. No crypto windfall. Just clarity about what's actually coming in, honesty about what's going out, a few structural changes, and then repeating the same basic habits for a year and a half. The unsexy truth about building financial stability is that it's not a moment. It's not a single decision you make once and then coast. It's a series of small, mostly boring choices made consistently over time. And the reason most people don't stick with it isn't that they lack willpower. It's that they've been sold a version of financial improvement that requires them to hate their life in the short term in exchange for some vague promise of security in the future. That trade-off isn't sustainable. You don't get to pause your life while you build savings. Your life is happening right now, in the middle of all of it. The goal is to build something that fits inside your actual life, not a parallel, austere version of it where you've stripped out everything that makes your days worth living. Financial progress doesn't have to look like a straight line. There will be months where something goes sideways and you save less than you planned. There will be moments of doubt where the number in your account feels too small relative to everything life costs. That's not failure. That's just how it goes for everyone. including the people who eventually get where they wanted to go. What matters is that you keep going. Not perfectly, not dramatically, just consistently enough that a year from now, you can look back and see movement in the right direction. That Tuesday evening, cold coffee, stomach drop, bank balance, 10 days until payday, is a familiar place for a lot of people. But it doesn't have to be a permanent address. The path out isn't glamorous. It's just clear and consistent and more available than most people realize. Start with the number that hits your bank account. Go from there. If this helped you think about money a little differently, like this video and subscribe for more eye-opening wealth-building breakdowns. That Tuesday evening feeling, checking your account and not knowing where the money went. When was the last time that happened to you? And more importantly, are you still there? Let me know in the comments section. I read and respond to all of them. I will see you in the next video.